The story or stories you are about to hear are to entertain. The writers of these stories may claim they are true, yet they may not be. That is up to you to decide. After all, this world is a strange one. Hello, kitties. Today I have got another assortment of spooky goodness, ranging from urban legends that might be a little too true, and a man who thinks he is, and might just be, a werewolf. Enjoy these assorted stories, and be sure to send me your story so I can narrate it. Just go to darkstories.org. And stick around till the end and I'll let you know which story I like the most in this episode. If you send me your scariest story, I may just narrate it and make it my next favorite. Now, let's begin. Mary, from Seonghwagod. I was in high school. My friend at the time invited me to stay with her and her parents at a trailer park by Mount Snowdon. Of course, I agreed, and the first night nothing happened. Just rain and some arguments. But on the second night, we decided to play Bloody Mary at 3 a.m. My friend went first. With the lights on, she stood in front of the mirror and said Bloody Mary 3 times, whilst giggling in between. Once she had finished, she'd turn the lights off and then run back to her bed. We sat there, being quiet for a few minutes, waiting for something or anything to happen. But as we stifled our laughter, nothing happened at all. I turned the light back on. It was my turn to do it. I stood in front of the mirror, took a deep breath, and said it. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. I turned the light off and ran back to bed. Slowly, something was different this time around. We started to giggle again, but suddenly, I felt a hand on my leg. I told my friend to get off, but she looked at me, not understanding what I was talking about. "My hand isn't on your leg," she said. "You're just trying to scare me," I laughed. Then she raised her hands out of the blanket and showed me, and at the same time the fingers of the hand on my leg began to move. I freaked out. I didn't want to move, but I knew I needed to turn the light on. After a few moments, the hand seemed to slip away. With this strange thing no longer touching me, I soon got the courage to get up and turn the light back on. I quickly scanned the room, but we were the only ones in it. I didn't want to continue this game after that, but she wanted to, so she assured me, saying that we could hold hands next time around. I hesitantly agreed, then she got up to go again. She went to the mirror, saying Bloody Mary 3 times, then turned the light off and ran to our bed. We held hands like she had said, but after a few moments, she said, "There's someone touching my arm, and it hurts." Before long, a burning sensation began to grow on my inner arm. I could feel sharp nails dragging across my skin. I didn't want to say anything, but I started to cry. I wasn't sure why this was happening, and why my friend wanted to continue. I knew the scratching sensation was not my friend, but my brain wouldn't tell me otherwise. It knew that she was the only person in here with me. That the only explanation was that she was somehow scratching me, even though her hands were clasped in mine. Then the nails dug in real deep, worsening the pain so much that I let go of my friend and ran to turn the light on. I found bright red marks all over me. And what's scary is that they don't look to be scratched from the outside, but more like they were scratched from the inside. We kept the lights on for the rest of the night, and we did not go to sleep. I'll never play Bloody Mary again, and if I were you, I wouldn't go taking any chances. Wendigo or Skinwalker, from MrNobody. A few weeks ago, I had some laundry to do. I messaged a friend of mine to let him know I was on my way to his place to do some laundry. I lived in an apartment complex without a washer or dryer setup, and they were always okay with me doing my laundry there. Well, then he messaged me back, letting me know that his washer was having problems draining. Crap, I thought. The closest laundromat was about 3 miles away, and I didn't have a car to get there. But I didn't mind the walk. As it was, I already walked everywhere. The only thing I was concerned about was it getting dark early due to it being winter. I gathered my things and geared up with some warm clothes. The weather was going to be chilly. I was halfway there. I forgot my flashlight. Since some of the roads don't have streetlights on them, it was almost necessary. I didn't want someone to accidentally hit me due to not seeing me, and I didn't want to lose my way. I figured I'd use my flashlight on my phone on the way home instead. I make it to the laundromat in one piece, then do my laundry. When I'm done, I get started on my way home. It was getting pretty dark by then. You might be wondering why I didn't have a friend pick me up. Normally I would, but he was at work at the time, and my other friends were busy too. Anyway, I was on my way home now. In order to get home, I had to walk down a street with dense forest on each side. This specific street was one with no streetlights, of course, so as I began to walk down it, I took out my phone and used the flashlight. But I immediately noticed that it was only at 12%, and I knew the flashlight would drain it in a heartbeat. Well, hopefully this gets me far enough, I thought. Just then, I heard it. A sound like a giggle or a wheeze, followed by something saying, "No lights." I quickly turned in the direction of the sound, completely horrified and surprised. I pointed my phone's flashlight toward the sound, but what I found was the head of a deer peeking around the corner of a tree. Before I could calm myself, I saw the deer's head rise 8 feet off the ground, and then the head released another laugh. It turned and walked away, but not too far. I stood there in shock, snapped out of it, and then I heard a car driving towards me. I was thankful for this car passing by. It gave me the courage and urgency to run home. I made it home okay. I didn't hear or see anything else that was strange. I believe that what I saw may have been a Wendigo or Skinwalker, but I'm not too sure which. The Eyes, from Victor Lian, 608. Most children have overly active imaginations. Their parents often don't believe their bizarre stories about the doll talking to them or the boogeyman coming out of the closet. However, these experiences, allegedly strewn up through a child's imagination, they stick in that child's mind for a lifetime. My chilling childhood experience is one of my first memories that I ever had. I was about 3.5 years old, and our family had just moved into a new home. My brother and I slept in 2 separate beds. My bed was the furthest away from the big closet we had. I was always creeped out by that closet in the darkness of my room. Even when the room was pitch black, I could still see the big white sliding doors that covered the closet's pitch black interior. The white doors would never close all the way, so I would just lie in bed, often watching that black sliver of empty closet space. My worst fear was that I would see a hand curl its way around the sliding door and open it in complete silence. As a child, I thought the only way to ensure nothing could creep up on me from that closet was to watch it until I fell asleep. One night, I was following that very routine, watching the closet door. But that night was different. As I was watching it, I could see moonlight illuminating my room through the window. Then slowly, I could feel a presence in the room begin to grow. My eyes were glued to that closet door. I was waiting for my moment to scream so that my parents could come rushing into the room to comfort me. But my focus soon changed. I could see that my vision was darkening. The light from the moon was being sucked out of existence. I froze. My eyes were no longer staring at the closet. They were just idle, like they were waiting to seek out a new source of sinister energy. I felt as if the presence knew I would be expecting it to emerge from the closet. Then, as if the house lost power, the sounds of the furnace, the refrigerator, the water plinking in the bathroom, all droned away until I couldn't hear them anymore. I was surrounded by complete and utter silence. Off to my right was the hallway. The door was wide open. It was also painted white, but I couldn't see it. My eyes slowly turned toward the dark, pitch-black void that was my hallway. Even though the walls were painted white, I still could not see any of them. Eventually, I was sitting up straight in my bed, directly facing the hallway. I felt like the dark hallway was engulfing me in a complete emptiness, like I was in deep space, where no one would hear me or find me. Then suddenly, without warning, I was completely shocked to see two insanely big eyes, each the size of my head. They appeared no less than a meter in front of me. I saw no eyelids or lashes, just two vertically shaped oval eyes. The eyes were completely white, with black circular pupils, staring right back at me. I opened my mouth to scream and yelled with all my might, but no matter how hard I tried, no sound would come out, like my voice was being sucked right out of my mouth. I screamed so hard in the silence, I strained so much that I think I passed out. I woke up to a completely light-filled room. It was morning, as if my previous night's experience never actually happened. I had zero time to process my thoughts. It had all happened in an instant, but everything was back to normal now. Being so young, I shrugged it off and went on with my day. Even so, I still believed that this was no dream. I believe it was truly a spiritual encounter. If it really was a dream, how do I remember it so perfectly, so vividly, after all this time? How does one recall a dream from when you were 3.5 years old, when you can't even remember the dream you had last night? It's been 15 years, and I believe that spirits live in my home. I try my best to respect them. Perhaps the scary encounter I had was just a spirit trying to say its first hello, and I simply wasn't ready. The Strangest New Year's Day in 1996. From Sardius. My mom told me this story a long while ago, and I've never since really had the time to post it online, until now. It happened on December 31st, going into January 1st of 1996. My dad, mom, and aunt, her husband, and her 4-year-old son were all sat in my dad's car, on their way back from Birmingham, England for New Year's. My mom said it was past 1 a.m., and the motorway was deserted. There were no cars on the M62. My mom said that this wasn't out of the ordinary. It was New Year's Day after all, and people were probably still drinking or passed out, or hanging out with friends and family still. So because of that, the night was dark, cold, and extremely foggy. They were 40 minutes away from home. My dad suddenly brought up the fact that the car was slowing down. She asked why, but he said that it wouldn't go any faster. My dad just kept on driving, saying that it should be fine, nothing too serious, as long as the car kept going. After that, the car was still going quite slow, probably around 40 miles per hour. Compare that to the motorway's recommended 60 to 70 miles per hour. My mom was sitting in the back on the right-hand side, where the right door window seat was. She said that as they were talking, she saw a woman walking on the hard shoulder on the far edge of the road. The hard shoulder is the small road where you're supposed to pull up to if your car breaks down. Anyway, she saw this woman walking the opposite direction. She believed it was a woman because the frame of the person looked feminine. Immediately, as she saw her walk past, my mom caught every detail of the person. She was of average height, about 5.5 feet, with a trench coat on that went to her knees. She had long boots, and her trench coat collar was pulled up and unraveled. The woman was looking straight at the ground, but as she got a better look at the woman, she saw that the woman didn't have a head at all. She would have seen the top of her head as she walked past. Yet, not being able to see her head, or her not having a head at all, the woman was walking confidently, as if in her own world with nothing to worry about, despite the fog. This struck my mom with complete oddity, because it was completely random and bizarre how the woman appeared to have no head, and that she was walking so casual-like. That's what my mom focused on and what she remembered most. Needless to say, my mom was creeped out to no end. As soon as she saw this, she was taken aback. She watched the woman go by and then kept looking out the window, watching her. She then looked around briefly in the car and noticed that everyone else had the same worried expression on their face apart from my dad, who had to focus on driving. Now more than ever, everyone seemed to be worried that the car would break down. My mom eventually said, "If that woman was walking on the hard shoulder like that, then where the heck is her car?" My aunt replied, "Yeah, I thought they were broken down, but now that you mention it, I still haven't seen a car anywhere." This just freaked everyone out even more, and then my dad got involved, asking what the heck just happened. Everyone was crapping bricks by this point and tried to make out any rational explanation as to what they saw, but the truth and evidence was in front of them. They continued to watch for any broken down cars on the road, but there just wasn't any. My mom also mentioned how scarily and unusual the woman was dressed, and then my aunt agreed. She saw it too, just like that. Her husband was speechless because, like my mom, they didn't see any cars nearby or in front. A few moments later, as everyone was trying to make sense of this, a car came driving by, going faster than my dad to the left. There was a person in the car with the most creeped out face, and the driver too seemed to be horrified. They were both obviously scared and were shouting inaudibly after rolling their windows down. They were gesturing with their hands as if to say there's something really screwed up back there. After a few short seconds, everyone in my dad's car figured out what they were saying. They were telling us to get the hell out of here, to leave, go. They passed by, speeding off into the night without waiting for anyone. After that, everyone in the car was telling my dad to floor it. Just as soon as they did, my dad kept pressing on the accelerator, and then the car began to pick up speed quickly. Nobody looked back. They were too scared. They wanted to be out of there. Thankfully, they made it home with no further incidents. When everyone was home telling my dad's older brother about what happened, he was insisting that he grab his camera and go back. He wanted to film everything that they saw. My mom told him off, saying that that's a ridiculous idea. She knew, and everyone else knew too, that there would be no going back there that night, no matter what. As she was relaying this story to me, she told me that no matter how many scary or freaky stories you hear, if someone really experienced something real, you'll notice that their story never changes. And I of course notice now, no matter how many times my mom tells me the story, it hasn't ever changed. Not a single detail. Monster in my campsite. From Phoenix Boy, 30. I was in high school. Me and two friends of mine, Jay and Ray, had been talking about taking a camping trip to a popular swimming spot in Oregon. We eventually agreed on a spot. Me and Jay asked Ray not to bring his girlfriend, Sabrina, as we wanted it to just be us guys. We planned to go the weekend after Halloween. I stayed at Jay's the day before, so we could wake up, pack up, then head over to Ray's. But when we got there, Sabrina was there with camping gear. Now, Jay and I could not stand Sabrina. We said we forgot something and went back to Jay's. We grabbed a werewolf costume that I used on Halloween. After everything was packed up at Ray's, we left the city and went to the campsite. After about a 45-minute drive and a 4-hour hike through the woods, we finally made it to our spot. We set up our tents and got a fire going before dark. Sabrina, well, she was doing nothing but complaining. Jay and I said we were going to bed, as it's been a long day, and so Ray and Sabrina decided to do the same. But Jay and I weren't really going to bed. Jay instead helped me get into my werewolf outfit. I went over to Ray's tent and scratched at it, crouching down in front of the tent door. I looked over at Sabrina. She screamed. When I saw Ray reaching for his 9mm, I quickly pulled off my mask and laughed, shouting, "It's just me, man." Ray said it wasn't funny, and we argued. Eventually, I went to bed. At about 2:30 or 3:30 a.m., sometime around there, Jay and I heard heavy footsteps walking around outside. Something was leaning in and pushing on the tent. We thought it was Ray trying to get back at us. Whatever it was walking around on 2 legs. The following morning, when Jay and I stepped outside, we quickly found the footprints of it. They looked canine in origin, and they definitely were on 2 legs. They traced around our and Ray's tent. So we confronted Ray, asking him if he was trying to scare us last night. But Ray denied that it was him, because he had been thinking that we were messing with him. The 3 of us, confused, followed the tracks back to the tree line and saw massive claw marks down the tree. We quickly packed up, and we have not gone back there since. All of us still talk from time to time, but we don't bring up that night. I wonder what would have happened if one of us was outside the tents when that thing came around. It smelled of smoke. From QueenBee. I grew up in the Toronto area in Ontario, Canada, and my family moved often due to financial issues. Some of the places I've lived are just blurs of memory, the window seat in one place or the yard of another. But there's one house we lived at that I can never forget. My family moved into a home that had been built during the Second World War, or shortly before it, and as such, it was a small red brick structure with one of those little cabinets at the front door for milk deliveries. It was a charming little place to look at from the road, but there are many things that happened in the short 6 months we lived there that turned this dream home into a nightmare. The day we moved in was the first day my brothers and I had stepped foot in the house, and as soon as we did, we knew something just wasn't right. You see, my papa was First Nations and had the sight, like his grandmother before him, and we've been told it skips a generation, so we were supposed to have it too. When we walked in, we felt it right away. The building was cold, as if the AC was on, though it had no such unit. It was mid-June as well. Also, the air felt as if it was heavy and charged, like a storm was brewing overhead, though it was clear skies outside. The whole house felt like this until the day we moved out, and likely feels like this to this day, I'm sure. Things began to happen that night as I slept in my new room for the first and only time. I lay in my bed, trying to doze off in the unfamiliar place. I started to smell smoke, the strong, putrid smell of burning wire or plastic, and flesh. I started to get out of bed. My closet door began to rattle though, like someone was inside, trying desperately to get out, clawing and banging on it. After what felt like an eternity, I talked myself out of the safety of my bed, and I turned on the bedside lamp. The closet was visibly rattling still. I reached for the knob and threw the door open to find nothing. There was nothing inside. The smell of smoke and flesh was somehow instantly gone. From there on out, I slept in my older brother's shared room. By August, we had all smelled the smoke and flesh. Even my parents could smell it, but claimed it must be the tenant downstairs burning something. My brothers and I didn't buy that though, and we began to notice something that would follow the smell. A sort of shadow that would pass by our bedroom door from time to time. The door didn't quite fit the frame correctly, leaving a large gap under the door that the light from the bathroom would spill into. One night we were up late, playing video games on mute so our parents wouldn't hear us. We saw the shadow pass by the doorway, not even making a sound in the cold, old, creaking floorboards that would sound even when our cat stepped on them. It passed by a few times more before stopping, and the smell went away. After several nights of this, my oldest brother and I decided to leave the door open, at the protest of our middle brother, to see if we could see it. A brilliant idea, I know, but we were kids. We thought ourselves fearless. After what we saw that night, we couldn't say that we were fearless anymore. What walked past our door was a woman in a 1940s-style nurse outfit. White dress, stockings, shoes, apron, and cap. What remained of her hair was in victory curls and was a dark color. But the most striking thing about her appearance was her burns. Most of her body was one big burn, even showing charred bones in some places. She paced to our door without making a single sound. She stopped, and then she looked inside. She made eye contact with me, though she either had no eyeballs or they were all black. We stared for a while into each other's eyes. I could feel her pain, her fear, her sorrow. She then turned away and continued what I assumed to be her rounds. My oldest brother bolted up and slammed the door closed. We agreed to never sleep with the door open again. But who was she? Why did she dwell here still? And wouldn't hell be a kinder torment than the purgatory she seemed to be trapped in? Darkness in the House, from Emma.hunter. I was 16 years old, and I decided to spend the night at my grandmother's house one day. My grandmother fell asleep around midnight. As I should mention, she takes sleeping pills to help her sleep. Once she does, it's extremely hard to wake her up. But as she went to sleep, I was left sitting in the living room watching TV. It was maybe around 2 a.m. by then, and I was starting to get this weird feeling, like something was watching me. I started looking around the house, but I couldn't find anything out of the ordinary. Nothing out of place and nothing weird. As I was walking back to the living room, the front door caught my attention. I didn't remember leaving it unlocked, so I walked over slowly and locked it back. As I was walking away, I heard a little knock, almost like someone softly was knocking on the door trying to get my attention. I walked back and reached for the curtains with a trembling hand. I pulled them aside very slowly, knowing I was going to see something. I don't know what, but surely it would be terrifying. Outside, I saw nothing. I pushed it to the side and blamed it on my paranoia. I was up alone in a dark house. It was around 3:30 a.m. then, and I'd started trying to go to sleep. It was maybe 10 minutes after that I had closed my eyes when I heard a tapping sound coming from the window. It was barely audible, so I was surprised I even heard it. Still, I didn't pay it much mind. I thought it was just a tree branch. But the tapping grew louder and louder as time went on, and I was starting to get angry. I thought the raccoons were out and getting into things again. I walked over and jerked the curtains away from the window, but what I saw was far from a raccoon. I was frozen. I couldn't even scream or move my body, except to tremble. I could barely will myself to breathe. What I saw outside had fur on it, almost like a dog's fur. It looked like a deer, a dog, and a bear all mixed together. It was huge, and its eyes glowed a reddish-yellow color, almost demonic. I didn't know what to do. I thought I was going to pee myself, but that wasn't even the worst part. I slowly backed away, and it looked right at me and smiled. It tapped on the glass with a long and skinny arm with claws at the end. It just kept smiling, which I'm sure wasn't actually a smile, but a threat, the way a dog bares its teeth. Speaking of teeth, the teeth on this thing were extremely sharp and far from human. I didn't know what it was I was looking at. It was as if it was toying with me. It could probably smell the fear coming off of me in waves. It twisted its head at one point like it was watching me, like I was prey. Its eyes closed for a second, and I could hear it breathe in real deep. I finally got the courage to run away, and I woke up my mama. I told her something was outside, but she didn't believe me. I locked the bedroom door and sat on the floor, too scared to move. I started hearing the tapping again, growing louder like it did before. I thought it was going to break the glass and come inside, but all at once it stopped. But then I was more scared about not being able to hear it. I wondered what it could be doing. I didn't know where it was or where to expect it. I didn't see it again that night, but I stayed up every minute of the night, wondering what direction it was going to come from, or if it was waiting for me to come outside in the morning. A True Werewolf from ShadowWarrior. The incident happened many years ago when I was in high school. I'd heard initially about the said mentioned incident on the news on television, as well as at school, to exercise caution while roaming about on your own. The name of the incident was the Freed Park Murders. It took place in Houston, Texas. It's still listed as a cold case to this day. I didn't know that until I had looked up the case online. At the time of the incident, I'd resided in apartments that were located right down the street from Freed Park. The apartments are no longer there. Instead, there's now an IKEA there. Back in high school, I would be defined under the category of an introvert or a loner. I was very selective of who I defined as my friend. During lunchtime, I had the tendency to sneak into the school library and go to the upstairs region to look at paranormal books that they had on file during my lunch break. I was fortunate to make friends with another individual who practiced the same customs. During lunch, we would talk about paranormal events and their credibility of existence. As a result, at one point in time, this friend approached me in our school gym during a pep rally and informed me that another individual he knew wished to have a talk with me. They were sitting in the bleachers at the time. I walked over and introduced myself. As a result, for some reason or another, we took a shining to one another. He made it a point at that moment to inform me that he was cursed to be a werewolf. I didn't quite know what to believe at that moment. As time went on, he invited me to his apartment in the apartments that were next to Freed Park. and still are to this day, just listed under a different name, and are operated under new management. When I made it to this guy's home, he gave me specific details of how he had transformed into a werewolf. He showed me where he had jumped from his bedroom window on the second floor onto the ground below, leaving huge paw prints and indentations in the ground. I actually saw the prints he had mentioned. They were quite big, and they did look like they came from a canine. He also walked me through the woodline of Freed Park to show me the ritual site of some witches or a coven, who had helped him to metamorphosize into a werewolf, supposedly. Once he was done with his explanations or admission, I left in a hurry. I don't have any evidence of what really took place with him, only testimonial hearsay, really. This guy later moved, and I don't know where he is to this day. Maybe it's all hype or hallucination for him, but I'll let you be the judge. Whether or not he was crazy, it was still an eerie thing to experience that night. The Whistle in the Woods, from Lady Merlin. This happened about 8 years ago when I was 11. I was over at my best friend's house for a sleepover. We, my best friend, his older brother, and I, were all sitting around wondering what to do when his older brother suggested we go to the park. Now, something to know about this park was that it actually wasn't a park at all. It was more of a small and dense patch of forest in the middle of the suburbs, where my best friend lived. We all get ready and make the 5-minute walk down there. We're there for about half an hour when we decided to stop and take a break in the middle of the woods. As we were sitting there, we thought it would be fun to do the whistle from the Hunger Games. The movie had just come out back then, and we were all obsessed with it. So we started doing it until the brother told us to be quiet. At first we didn't know why, but then we heard it. A faint whistle. The brother repeated the whistle, and again there was a reply to his, except each time he did it, it would be closer, as if it was trying to locate where we were. We all froze, not sure what to do until it seemed to stop. We all agreed it was best to go home at this point. As we were about to come out of where we were hiding, I heard from a bush next to me, "Hey, come here." You can bet that we all took off running. As we were running, I swear I could hear someone running after us, so I turned my head back to look. When I turned back, I ran headfirst into a tree branch. I took a nasty fall, hitting my head. I don't really remember what happened after, but my friend and his brother must have carried me back, because the next thing I remember was my best friend over me asking if I was okay. We were now in the field on the opposite end of where we had entered. I had a black eye and a mild concussion. The boys were both covered in cuts and bruises too from running through the woods as quickly as they could. We haven't been back to the park ever since. We're all adults now, and we still talk about it and speculate on who or what that could have been. Shadow Figure, from Ruby the Scorpio. Many people are lucky enough to escape any terrifying paranormal encounters throughout their lives, but I unfortunately have not gotten that lucky. I'm 20 now and going to college in Idaho, but this happened when I was about 8 in a town in Oregon called The Dalles. My family and I lived in The Dalles for about 8 years, and during that time we lived in 2 different homes, a small house on the east side of town, and then we eventually moved into my grandparents' house in the heart of town. Now, this experience that I'm going to share with you took place in the first house that we lived in on the east side. The house was very small, as it only had 1 bedroom downstairs and a loft-style bedroom space upstairs, with a strange spiral staircase leading up to it. Naturally, my parents made me and my sister sleep in the loft, because they didn't want to climb the weird stairs every day. My sister and I didn't mind though. We had plenty of space to play, and I had a super cool skylight above my window that I could watch the stars through. The only thing my sister and I didn't like about this loft were these small little doors on either side, both of them just past the end of my bed. Sometimes we would wake up at night to find them creaking open and closed, but we just chalked it up to wind. However, this is not the scary part of the story. One early morning in the summertime, I woke up for some reason out of nowhere. I guessed that it was about 4:30 to 4:45 a.m. because I could see the sun that was starting to think about coming up through the skylight. It wasn't nearly enough light to cast any shadows in the room, which is why what I saw was so bizarre. I was 100% awake, and I was not in sleep paralysis, because I was able to move still. Something worth mentioning is that my twin bed was positioned along the wall, and I had about 1.5 feet of space in between me and the wall. In between my bed and the wall, at the lower right corner of my bed, crouched a dark figure. I blinked a few times to see if I was dreaming, but I wasn't. This figure was about the size of a human, except it was pitch black. I could make out legs, but it seemed as if its head was tucked in between its legs. I was petrified with fear, but my younger instincts told me to hide under my covers so it wouldn't know I was awake. The next thing I knew, it was morning. I woke up and looked down at the bottom of my bed and saw nothing. I know what I saw, and I'll never forget that creature, or that small little door at the end of my bed being slightly cracked that morning after I saw that thing. Did today's story spook you at all? Which one was your favorite? Let me know in the comments which story you enjoyed the most, and what stories you want to hear next. Personally, today I enjoyed the story It Smelled of Smoke. The smell of burning flesh is not a good one to live with, especially when you're so young. Now, waking up to the smell of bacon is an entirely different story. Good night. If you enjoyed this episode of Darkness Prevails, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you have a story of your own of any scary kind, share it with us at darkstories.org. I'd love to narrate it. Don't forget to check the description for links to how you can support the show. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to help by donating. Remember, stay safe out there, and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.